Hey everyone, thank you for joining us here today, and welcome to the Industry Best Practices Podcast. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into the Commercial Vehicle Operator's Permit, or CVOR. I'm going to be meeting with Chris Studley, who's going to be able to answer a lot of your questions, as he is a certified CVOR administrator, as well as a CVOR auditor. If you like what you see, please give us a follow, ring the bell, and let us know in the comments what you'd like to see in future episodes. So we'll move into talking about the CVOR, which I think for pretty much anybody who is involved with it is basically witchcraft. Trying to fully understand how it works, it's easier to figure out how the universe came into existence. So the CVOR is the Commercial Vehicle Operator registration, and it applies to only heavy vehicles.
Yeah, so you need a CVOR if you're a company, um, and you operate trucks with a gross or registered weight over 4,500 kilograms, a bus with a seating capacity of 10 or more passengers, a concrete pump or a mobile crane, or a tow truck, or any motor vehicle designed, modified, or configured or equipped to tow another vehicle. So buses, school purpose vehicles, there's all kinds of little nuances. So, for example, school purpose vehicles that can carry 6 or more passengers are required to be on your CVOR, which is an exception from the buses with a seating capacity of 10 or more passengers. So there's all kinds of little things that little adjustments that you have to make. But basically, it has to be for commercial purposes. So if you have a pickup truck, the pickup truck used for personal purposes without compensation does not require a CVOR. Um, Trucks towing a trailer for personal purposes don't require a CVOR. Buses, so I know some people convert school buses or transit buses into like motor homes, those don't require it. Um, and then ambulances, fire trucks, hearses, they don't require CVOR, even though they would technically meet the threshold.
Now, one of the things that you've told me about in the past that I think is really interesting. If you're driving a personal vehicle that is capable of reaching one of those criteria, so if, for example, big pickup truck, now it's your personal vehicle, you use it just to get to work and back, doesn't matter. If you need to do something work related in it, so let's say you needed to take a box of documents, small box, from one location to another, work related, work hours. Does that impact the CVOR in any way?
So, I mean, you're gonna end up relying on um, the judgment of the police officer if you get pulled over. What it actually states in the act is that a pickup truck does not require a CVOR as long as you are not carrying or towing a trailer, carrying commercial cargo or tools or equipment of any type normally used for commercial purposes. So if I have a personal pickup truck, if I were to take that pickup truck and drive it to work and we were to load it up with parts from our maintenance facility to transfer to another maintenance facility, and I got pulled over and the police
Mm-hmm.
officer asked me, what's with all the parts? And I said, well, I'm moving these parts from one location to another for my company. Then technically that truck is being used for a commercial purpose and would fall under the category of being required to be on our CVOR. Now, you may get a super nice police officer who just, in the same way, if you get caught speeding, you may get somebody who gives you a warning or doesn't do anything. But technically, by the letter of the law, it's a commercial vehicle being used for a commercial purpose.
So, in theory, your personal vehicle, you could get a ticket for it not being on the CVOR if you hooked up a trailer with some oil drums on it. In
Yep.
in theory.
And in fact, if you rent a trail, if you have a personal pickup truck and you rent like an open flatbed trailer,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things the rental company tells you is not to tow equipment like riding lawnmower, for example, on in the trailer, because very often uh, they'll pull cops will pull over just to check to see if, because you may be running your own personal landscaping company
Yeah.
and taking that riding lawnmower to a work site, and if you don't have a CVOR, I mean, you need to be able to prove that you're not using that piece of equipment for commercial purposes. That's why a lot of rental companies won't rent open flatbed trailers. They'll only rent enclosed trailers, because that way they don't want to get into a situation where their trailer becomes involved in an incident where, there's charges involved. So it's kind of a complicated little system.
Yeah, pretty much everything involved in the CVOR seems to be part of a complicated little system.
Yes, yes.
So what other risks are there? So, it's very easy to get caught up in it's my personal vehicle and I'm just running an errand. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you've gotten hit with a ticket that goes to the driver, correct?
Yes.
Does it, and another one could go to the organization?
If the police officer determines that the organization requires a CVOR and doesn't have it, that's the thing, right? Usually it only goes to the driver, because if I say, you know, I'm doing this for myself, and even if the operator doesn't believe me, he can't force me to give a CVOR number that I probably don't know
Yeah.
for a company that may or may not have one, right? So it's usually just a driver issue.
Now, all right. So we've talked a little bit about sort of the types of vehicles, and then that sort of offshoot there into the personal vehicle, because I think that's incredibly relevant. But what's really the purpose of it? So this is a government mandated process. Basically, it's a licensing so that you can operate these larger vehicles. Is there, if you have these vehicles, you have to pay a fee every year. Like, what does the government gain from having this regulatory process?
So the system is designed for safety, right?
Okay.
So it's designed to put responsibility on a company for making sure that the vehicles they use to operate meet certain safety standards. And it's not even just the vehicles; it's the company itself, right? So there's a um, there's a whole section of requirements under the CVOR for the responsibility of drivers that work for the company. There's other responsibilities on the company side outside of just the maintenance of the vehicle. They're responsible for certain training requirements. They're responsible for ensuring their drivers are properly trained, properly licensed, and don't have any outstanding issues with performance. So it's an entire safety system. I think in a lot of cases when we talk about the CVOR, we just focus on the vehicles themselves, but there's three key aspects of the CVOR. There's the requirement for the vehicles. There's the requirement for specific maintenance and specific upkeep of the vehicles, and then there's a requirement for training and performance standards for the drivers themselves. So it's all packaged into one thing that the government says, you know, this is uh, this is your rating. This is how you're performing based on all of the metrics that they use, and so that's what it's for, right? It's a safety system that it's actually mandated. All provinces in Canada are required to issue a national safety code number. And in each province, it's just called something different. So in Quebec, it's the PEVL. In Ontario, it's the CVOR. So it's effectively just a safety rating assigned to a company that operates commercial vehicles.
And it's like a fingerprint, right? It's a unique identifier for each organization. Location as well, or just organization,
Um, it
or it's
it
up to
depends
the
on
company.
Yeah, it depends on how you split it out, right? So one company can have multiple CVORs for different divisions. Um, your CVOR is not location specific, generally speaking, um, unless you cross provinces, in which case you may need, if you have bases in multiple provinces. Transdev, for example, has a PEVL in Quebec and a CVOR in Ontario. If you just transit from one province to another, then you only require the safety code number for your home province.
Now, another part of it. Now, there's a lot of vehicles out there that are on a CVOR. Not all of them have a CVOR number printed on the side. Now, the my understanding of that, and you can clarify, is that you only need to have a CVOR number printed on the external of your vehicle if you're going cross province or inter province, so into another province, or international, so driving from, for example, Ontario down into New York State, or Ontario into Quebec, or Ontario into Manitoba, whatever the case is. You need to have it printed on the vehicle, but if it remains only in Ontario, you don't. That's my understanding.
Yeah, so the reason for that is simply because the requirements are different in different provinces and states. In Ontario, we're required to actually carry the CVOR certificate in the vehicle. Um, and the MTO officers and police officers in Ontario know that and can ask for it. Whereas if you go to the States, you may pass through a state where it's not required that they have a separate piece of documentation. So the number has to be on the side of the vehicle.
Now, for Ontario, for example, if you don't have that piece of paper in the vehicle, and you were to be pulled over for any reason, you're in an accident, random check, there was a road violation, do you get a fine for not having it? Do they impound the vehicle?
It's a ticket.
Okay.
So it's in the same way you can get a ticket for not having your license on you. If you can provide the CVOR number to the officer, he can verify that it does actually exist. In the same way, for example, if you get pulled over and you don't have your insurance slip, when they run your license, they can see that you have valid insurance, but you are still required to provide an insurance slip, and you can get a fine if you don't. So the fine for operating a motor vehicle without a valid CVOR certificate is $260.
And that goes to the organization or the driver?
Goes to the driver.
And that's, I guess, partly to incentivize them actually doing their inspection, making sure it's there. So, like, I know for our organization, we require it as a part of the pre-trip inspection. They have to note it on their driver or DVIR. What is it? The driver vehicle information report.
Daily vehicle inspection report.
Inspection report. That's right. Okay. Now, the CVOR is obviously a safety related system. So it's to make sure that you're doing the right things, which means that there's certain situations where you will gain points or lose points. Like, I know for driver's licenses, it is that you lose points. I can't even remember now. Gain points.
In both cases, you gain.
Okay. Points. So you gain points. And so what sort of infractions could lead to earning, we'll call it, or being penalized with CVOR points?
So most Highway Traffic Act violations that result in demerit points also result in CVOR points. There are some CVOR specific violations. So not having your certificate is one of them. Not being able to produce a proper pre-trip inspection is one. Not being able to produce your last 14 days of hours of service or having an hours of service violation is technically will get you CVOR points. But for the most part, any Highway Traffic Act violation, if you get a careless driving ticket, it's 6 demerit points and 6 CVOR points. Speeding over 15 kilometers an hour is 3 demerit points and 3 CVOR points. So there's both. You get both when you're driving a commercial vehicle.
So kind of a double dip. One side penalizes the operator, the other side sounds like it penalizes the company, because CVOR point earned as a driver doesn't have any direct impact on them. The driver's license points do. So if so they don't have to. They won't suddenly be like, well, you're not allowed to drive a vehicle that requires a CVOR because you have personally earned or accrued a certain number of CVOR points.
No, the CVOR points have no impact on the driver, but the personal demerit points can have have an effect on your commercial vehicle license. So, for example, if you have a B license for a school bus and you accumulate 6 demerit points on your personal license, regardless of any CVOR points, you're automatically downgraded to a G license.
Now, sort of talking about the whole points side of it. There's obviously an impact as far as the percentages that it moves you into. So you accrue points and you start getting different percentages. So talk to me a little bit of the concept of a percentage. Like I've got 10 points and that equates to a certain percentage. So before getting into the formula, is it just the formula that drives what the percentages are?
Yes.
Okay.
So the formula itself drives the percent. Well, it's all of the variables in the formula that adjust the percentages. So the variables of the formula include how many vehicles you own, how many kilometers you travel, and how many points you get from 3 different categories, which are collisions, convictions, and inspections. So you can accrue points by getting into collisions, even if there are no charges. If you get into a minor collision, the officer doesn't lay any charges, but they determine that you were at fault. They put you as the primary on the collision documentation. You automatically accrue 2 CVOR points for the collision. If you get convicted of a traffic offense, you can get CVOR points that way, but they fall under the conviction category. And then if you fail any portion of a MTO vehicle inspection, you can get CVOR points. So there's 3 different categories that they score you on, and all 3 categories combined with the amount of vehicles that you use and the kilometers that you travel in a year, there's an extremely complex calculation that then calculates what they call your overall violation rate, which is the percentage score that they give every CVOR holder.
Okay, so I think I've got the formulas up. So can you see the screen here?
Yep, that is the
So
one.
all right, so
Well,
this is one of three you're saying, right? So this is the collision points threshold.
yes.
So we got the T col, which I imagine is total collisions points threshold.
Yeah, so the T col is the collision points threshold, which is, from my understanding, a different calculation that is based on the amount of vehicles you have and the kilometers that you travel in a year. And then they take that and they do this ridiculous calculation to get what they call your collision points threshold. Even I don't understand this. And I
Which
don't
is
understand it enough
which is
to
after
build
being
my
sent
own.
for like a 3-day course on how to understand it. And it seems like pretty much nobody understands it, and almost like that's what they wanted. So what we have here, so you got your total collisions, or total collision points threshold. So that number, I imagine, is established by the province. So you'll have somebody from the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario, or the MTO, say this is your T col number, your T col to call whatever. So that is equal to this number here, 1.363 times R, which is the rate of travel, kilometers per month. So that's just total number of kilometers, time to the power of 0.217. Did they ever explain where the power of 0.217 came from, or is it just somebody really liked that number? Their spouse was born on February 17th or something.
Yeah, no, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about the calculations. They showed us what it was, and they said basically, you have to spend 4 years in university just to understand the calculation, and even then there are pieces of the calculation that they don't tell you in advance, so
Mhm.
it makes it difficult for you to keep track with any accuracy of your own um, stats in advance. So you can get like your overall vehicle rate. It does show up on your CVOR after you renew, once they have your annual travel and number of vehicles and number of drivers and number of double shifted vehicles. Then you can start to use that to sort of calculate where you are, but it takes so much effort, and by the time you figure out the number, it's usually changed.
Which is fair because of the next part of the equation, which is multiplied by n divided by 24, 24 being the maximum number of months. So they look at a rolling 24-month period, but that rolling 24 months is not like a static 24 months. It's not just like from today back 24 months.
Yeah, so this is one of the parts that can be extremely confusing. So they take that 24-month window and they break it down into um three different pieces, but the length of time that's in each of those three pieces can vary and can change. And then they look at the threshold in each piece individually, and then they average them all together.
Yes.
So for example, I'm looking at one of our CVORs now, and I'm not going to show it obviously, but the three windows. So it's the last 24 months from yesterday, 24 months back. The first window is from 2020 04/20, so April 20th, to 2020 12/31. So from April 20th to December 31st. It's 8.4 months. The second window is from January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2021. It is 12 full months. And then the third window is from January 1st, 2022 to April 20th, 2022, which is 3.67 months.
Yeah.
So there's there's no rhyme or reason as that I'm aware of as to how those windows are captured, because I've seen them change. And while we have absolutely nothing else in the CVOR change, those windows change and our overall violation rate changes as a result because of the way each individual window is calculated and then averaged.
All right. So there's three of these. So convictions point threshold. So the collisions, that's accidents, and it's only accidents that have been reported, obviously.
Yeah, not only that, it's only accidents that have accrued points. So if you are in an accident where the officer determines that you were not at fault or there is no fault, um, the way they fill out the form is they put you, ideally they put you second on the accident report, and therefore you accrue no CVOR points.
That's right. I remember you telling me about this. So if you're the only one involved, you are automatically number one. If you are involved in it and not at fault, and at fault and preventability, obviously we recognize as being different things. It's a whole different discussion. But you're
Yeah.
not at fault. You're supposed to be put down as the secondary.
Yes. And the what often happens is you get situations where the police officer either isn't aware of the way it should be filled out, or simply does it wrong, or I mean, you don't always know why, but if you are the primary on the accident sheet, you accrue 2 CVOR points regardless of anything else on the accident sheet. So very often we'll get into situations, and we had this in the past, where we'll look at our CVOR abstract, and we'll see a collision where we were clearly not at fault and we have all the documentation to provide to back that up, but we've accrued 2 CVOR points. And when you contact the MTO and challenge that, they'll say, well, you were listed as the primary on the collision report. And if you want to have those 2 points removed, you have to get a hold of the officer who filled out the collision report, have him submit a new collision report revised to put you as number 2. And then in some cases, you can get a hold of the officer, and in some cases, you can't. And in some cases, they're super helpful and they're willing to do it for you. And I had one case recently where I called the officer, and the officer said, listen, that accident happened 6 months ago. I don't even remember what happened. I'm not changing anything. And therefore, you're just stuck with the 2 points. Sorry, one of the things that we did previously was we actually taught that to our supervisors, who were able to have that conversation with the officer on the scene of the accident if they saw something amiss in the collision log, which helps a lot too, right? Because in a lot of cases, the officer's more than happy to just, oh yeah, sorry about that. No, correct it right there while they're there on the scene and they remember what's going on. So that helps a lot if you have a situation where you can have a supervisor who attends the scene of every accident.
Yeah, you want to be on top of that as early in the game as possible. And we'll come back to disputing CVOR points in a minute. We'll just close this out. So there's the collision side of it, the conviction side of it. Now, this is one that can be a little bit random because you don't necessarily know whether there's going to be conviction for potentially years, right? Like if there's a situation where somebody's charged with careless, the points don't hit immediately.
Yeah, so when a charge is laid by the MTO, nothing will hit the CVOR until the final conviction is rendered. So in most cases, the employee or the company, depending on the policies and procedures of the company, will fight the ticket. And as long as the ticket is going through that process where they're mediating through the prosecutor, or in some cases where they decide I'm fighting it all the way and they take it to trial, that those points all sit on hold until a final conviction is rendered. And then the final conviction happens, and then immediately the CVOR points get added to the CVOR. So yeah, in most cases where we know that there was a ticket and we actively try to fight it, we have a log where we keep track of incidents that happened 6, 7, 8 months ago that are still not on our CVOR yet because they're still in dispute.
So you could be sitting there thinking that you're in great shape, and then all of a sudden a whole bunch of things get finalized and your CVOR is in terrible shape, and as we'll get into in a minute, you can have your ability to operate these vehicles be completely revoked. And for a school bus company or a transit company, that's shut the doors. So it's obviously pretty huge. Now, what would happen if let's say I'm one of your drivers, I get charged with careless, 6 points, and I spend 2 years fighting it, and it falls outside of the 24-month window by the time it's finalized. Does that mean it never hits, or do they still make sure that you get penalized for that?
So I haven't dealt with that specifically, but I know that there is some stuff that's on our CVOR that is outside of the 24-month window of the incident, because it lists the conviction date on the CVOR too, right? So if I go try and find a verbal example. So I'm looking at an incident where it says incident date was February 25th. Conviction date was April 14th. So this, as far as I understand, won't leave our CVOR until 24 months after the conviction date.
After the conviction date. So you're going to be penalized with it. If it happens, you're dealing with it. You can't try and escape it by delaying in the courts and just throwing money at it, which makes sense because for a lot of businesses, it would make more sense to spend a whole bunch of money fighting things in the courts for 2-3 years and then just trying to bounce it off your CVOR and keeping things clean. Okay, so that's sort of the conviction side of it. And you said there's one more, so the inspection points threshold. So this one I don't know that I know too much about, because I think for the most part, we've always ensured that our inspections are up to point. But talk to me a little bit about, like, what is this? How does it impact? Is there any significant risk with it?
Usually, this is the part of the CVOR that's at 0% for most companies. It may be different in the trucking industry where they have to stop at the random inspection stations on the highways all the time. Buses, the buses that we operate don't have to deal with that. So our inspections are much more controlled. Usually the MTO will call us and say, hey, we're coming to this facility to do an inspection. I have to see 5 or 6 vehicles. They'll often list the vehicle numbers that we have to provide. They come, they do an inspection, and they leave. I don't think I've ever seen an inspection that's done in that manner lead to any points. What I have seen is MTO officer pull over a vehicle on the highway and ask to see their daily inspection sheet and either find a defect that isn't listed on it, or they um, found a defect that is considered a major defect and they shouldn't have been operating the vehicle, in which case they can be charged with points that fall under the inspections section of the CVOR. And I've only ever seen one CVOR that has any inspection points on it at all.
All right, so it's from the transit side, fairly there's transit school busing side of things, pretty pretty rare. It's the collisions, it's the infractions that would be the most impactful. Now,
Yep.
with that in mind, if we go over to this document here, so um, anything below 35%, using those equations that, I don't have my 4-year mathematics or statistics degree, so we went through, and it's obviously as confusing as it is, but anything under 35% is considered acceptable. You want to be as far under as possible. Basically, nobody's at zero. Single digits is phenomenal. But what? So what's considered really a really good percentage? First of all.
So, well, there's two things to consider actually. Um, the percentage is your CVOR overall violation rate. There's another thing that gets attached to your CVOR, which is called your CVOR safety rating. So your safety rating is essentially a verbal classification based on audit history and overall violation rate. So most companies, they only care about their safety rating. It's only when you get into companies that look into your CVOR for RFP purposes or insurance purposes where they dig into it enough to look at your overall violation rate, which is the percentage. But I can tell you from an insurance perspective, they consider anything less than 25% to be um, a good CVOR. I don't know that there's discounts associated with it or not. Every insurance company is a little bit different, but as a general rule, your CVOR won't impact your insurance if it's less than 25%.
25% is good. Now there's audited and unaudited. 25% unaudited is good. You have no issues. Everybody's sort of happy. 25% audited is better, but what's the difference?
So the auditing actually only comes into play on your safety rating, which is the worded safety rating, not the percentage. So there are 5 different safety ratings that you can have as a company. Um, they range from unsatisfactory, which is not good, obviously, conditional, which is 70%. When you hit 70%, you're automatically switched to conditional. Unsatisfactory is like you have to go in and explain why you should be able to continue operating the vehicle. And then there's the 3 ones that you see most often. Well, the one that you see most often by far is satisfactory unaudited, which they say 90% of all CVOR holders sit in the category of satisfactory unaudited. That means that you maintain an on-road violation rate of 65% of less or less, and you have never had a Ministry of Transportation CVOR audit. If you ever have and successfully pass a Ministry of Transportation CVOR audit, you move from satisfactory unaudited to satisfactory, which is considered significantly better. So that's where you can never get better than satisfactory unaudited if you haven't passed an audit. Then if you have, you can move into satisfactory, and then you can move into excellent, but it is very, very difficult to get excellent. Only 0.2% of all CVOR holders have an excellent safety rating.
Is there any strategic value in having that excellent rating?
I would imagine that from a RFP and business perspective, yes, and probably from an insurance perspective as well. There is a significant amount of prestige associated with an excellent CVOR safety rating.
Which is fair. 0.2% of all organizations have it. So,
Yep.
so on the screen right now, we've got sort of the steps between
Mhm.
35% and 100%. So we've established that 25% you're in great shape. 35% you get the warning letter. So this is the MTO in our case sends a letter saying what?
It's effectively just a letter saying that your CVOR has hit the 35% threshold, and you're at risk of potentially triggering an audit if you continue to go up. So it's effectively what it says it is. It's just a warning letter to say, hey, your CVOR is not trending in the right direction. And there's nothing else that really comes out of that, with the exception of, the fact that your violation rate could change business opportunities for you.
In essence, it's a warning. You need to correct this. If you don't correct this behavior, you're going to continue to accrue more percentage points, if you will, and that can trigger a facility audit.
Yes.
So what happens in the facility audit? They come in, they check your records. What do they try and tackle?
So there's three portions of a facility audit. There is a hours of service audit where they select a random sampling of your staff, and they pick a window in the past 24 months, and they say this is the window we're going to use. Usually it's 1 month, and they take a random sampling of the staff. The sampling is dependent on the size of your staff. The more staff you have, the more they check. And then they go through all of the hours of service records for all of those selected employees, line by line, to make sure that there's no hours of service violations, to make sure there are no what they call form and manner errors, which are missing signatures, incompleted documentation, anything that wouldn't trigger an hours of service violation but is a mistake in the paperwork itself. So that's the first section, is hours of service. So they go through all of that in detail. The second section is the vehicle maintenance review. So what they look for there is actually three different key pieces of information. They look to see that your daily inspections are being completed and being completed properly. They're looking to see that the results of the daily inspections and any defects that are found are effectively communicated to your maintenance department. And they're looking to see that maintenance has reviewed those records and corrected the defects. So um, they look for, did you find the defect? Did you communicate the defect? And did maintenance correct and record the defect? So it's a full circle thing where the driver needs to find it. They need to identify to maintenance that it's there, and maintenance needs to fix it and let the company know that the driver found the defect and the defect has been fixed. That's the second part of the CVOR audit. And then the third part is driver training. So that's specific to CVOR related collisions, convictions, or inspection failures. So they will pull a random sampling of any driver that's accrued points in any of the 3 points categories over the past 24 months. And they will go through their personnel files to make sure that we did, as a company, appropriate corrective action and follow up to account for the conviction, the collision, or the inspection failure. So there's those are the three different parts of the CVOR facility audit, and you're required to get at least 50% on all three sections to pass. So if you get 100% on hours of service and 100% on vehicle maintenance and 49% on driver training, you fail the audit.
So what happens when you fail the audit? Is this you're below 35%, they're leaving you alone. 35%, hey, you don't correct your behavior, you're going to start to have issues. 50%, the audit, is that just an opportunity for them to show you where to improve, or is there potential fallout from that audit?
So usually when you get to 50%, it triggers an audit. They come in and do the audit. If you don't pass the audit, they automatically downgrade you to either conditional safety rating or unsatisfactory safety rating, depending on the results of the audit.
Okay, so now it says here that you hit 70%, you automatically go to that conditional. So let's talk about conditional or lower. So what comes out of that? So I'm no longer at satisfactory. I'm not in the 0.2% that's excellent. Now I'm at conditional. Is there additional scrutiny? Is there the possibility that the insurance company is going to be increasing my costs? What comes out of that?
So yeah, this is the point. A conditional safety rating is the point where now it's going to actually impact your business, right? If you're doing contracting work, any company that you're doing an RFP for, if you tell them you have a conditional safety rating, you're usually automatically disqualified. Your insurance will go up. Your CVOR renewal frequency goes up. Your potential auditing frequency goes up again. Like they could come back in and do another audit. It's very bad for a company to get a conditional safety rating.
So it's bad and it's difficult to get. In essence, you have to be performing exceedingly poorly to hit that. But if you do, by the sounds of it, there's a substantial financial implication and there is a substantial paperwork implication. You're going to be watched much more closely until you get yourself out of that conditional or worse rating. So now I continue to not operate properly. I'm not properly inspecting the buses. My drivers are doing all sorts of crazy things on the road. My CVOR continues to get worse. I've had the inspection. I didn't improve. I got a conditional CVOR. I'm now at 85%. So meeting with the ministry is required. I'm guessing that is not a friendly meeting.
No, it is not. It is a meeting to explain to the ministry why you should be able to continue to operate motor vehicles.
So it'd be like getting too many points on your personal license and having to sit down and explain why you need to keep your personal license. Same idea, just from a company standpoint.
Yes.
So that could basically, you hit 85%, you could basically potentially be at a close the doors scenario. Now, I know typically the ministry isn't looking to have companies shut down, but there is now that possibility.
Yep. Yeah. So when you go in for that meeting, there's only two outcomes of that meeting. One is that you will receive a conditional safety rating and usually a list of directives that you'll have to achieve in order to continue to operate your CVOR. Or in the event that you're unable to convince them, you immediately get downgraded to what they call an unsatisfactory safety rating, which is an immediate suspension of your ability to operate commercial vehicles.
All right. So unsatisfactory is basically the lowest.
Yeah. So if you are listed as unsatisfactory, you cannot operate a commercial vehicle. Usually what happens is That meeting takes place. Um, it doesn't go well. They issue you a suspension. And as long as your company is under suspension, you have the unsatisfactory safety rating. Um, you can then choose to appeal it. If you choose to appeal it, you immediately go to conditional until the appeal decision is rendered, and then it changes back to, or change to whatever it is based on the appeal. And the only other thing that can happen is you improve and you go back up to conditional on your own, or they cancel your CVOR, and then you simply can't get one again.
Which is not good, or thanks to truckstash-r-us.ca and their handy documentation here that I pulled up just for a quick graphic. 100% sanction analysis begins, and that's bad, ... really bad. So I think they've articulated that about as well as you possibly can. Now, you were talking before about fighting CVOR points. So I know that this is something that basically every organization should try to do, because again, you're trying to protect your CVOR. You have to look at that as a critical resource to how you do business. So even if the CVOR points were awarded or applied justly, you want to try and have them reduced or removed to protect your company's best interests. Now, part of that is, or basically the entirety of that, so you talked a little bit about, well, you know what, if you have a supervisory person who's attends the scene, they can try and make sure that, they talk to the officer, have us put into the secondary position when it should be the case. Reach out to the officer during the paperwork phase, before that 6 months where they're like, look, I don't remember, I've dealt with so many things, you're gonna have to just deal with it. But you can also sometimes build a very positive relationship with the MTO, have a representative there that you work very nicely with, and are very supportive of and understanding with, and hopefully that they will be the same to you. And you are basically trying to put yourself into a position where you can have a conversation and not have all of the potential points applied. Is my understanding correct on that?
Yeah, in a sense, there is actually an official CVOR points appealing process, where there's a generic, I believe it's CVOR at mto.ca or .gov.ca or whatever it is, where you can simply provide them with any information that you have on any CVOR incident that's listed on your report, on your abstract, and ask them to review it. It takes a long time in a lot of cases. It depends how backlogged the MTO is. And in most cases, it doesn't really yield anything. You're never going to be able to appeal a conviction because the appeal process comes before the conviction. So once a conviction CVOR, or once a conviction hits your CVOR, there's no appealing it. You can't appeal anything that is legitimate. Usually, the only things you can appeal are documentation errors. So we have had instances where we got CVOR points for a vehicle that doesn't belong to us, right? Somebody just typed it into the system incorrectly. Those are pretty straightforward to appeal. It can take several months to actually get it removed, but they're usually pretty good with that. The other one is accidents where no charges were laid. So it's that first or primary and secondary on the collision report. In that case, sometimes I've been able to just say, hey, listen, we were stationary, and then the MTO looks at the collision report and it says that, and then they just remove the points. Or in some cases, you have to reach out to the officer and have them reach out to the MTO to have the points removed. But that's the official appeals process, and that's the process that most companies will have to use.
So yeah, going back to the friendly relationship side of it, it's obviously not to have anything undone that's legitimate or a
Nope.
conviction. It's just expediting the process and making sure that if you have built that relationship, it can prevent a lot of the hassle and paperwork that would come up trying to deal with it later.
Yeah, I mean it's just instead of sending it to the generic mailbox where maybe somebody looks at it today, maybe somebody looks at it next week, you're sending it to a person who is going to respond more quickly. The process itself doesn't change. In a lot of cases, when I've had that relationship, I ask for an appeal, I have to provide the same evidence, the same documentation that you would with the regular process. It just works a little bit faster.
Which makes sense, right? And
Yep.
it goes to show the old building relationships is just always better. I know sometimes we've had experience with people who get a little bit combative with the MTO on these sorts of things, and that's simply no benefit. Don't do it. Build that relationship. Try and save the paperwork, and take your lumps when you have them, and try and correct the behavior. Now the last part of the CVOR. So there is a standard audit process. Now, I know that you're certified as an auditor, so you can
Mhm.
be sent into another organization because you can't officially audit yourself.
Nope.
You would have to you could do an internal audit to sort of see where you would land, but the official audit process, you need somebody from another organization, and what's the frequency on that process, and what are they looking for?
So there is no set frequency for a CVOR audit. It is functionally identical to the MTO facility audit. It's the exact same process, you look at the exact same things. Um, the purpose of it is actually to prepare you for an MTO facility audit. So based on your chart, you automatically get one at 50%, and that's bad. The MTO comes in and does an audit. That's bad. If you are a very good, very positive, very proactive company and you want that satisfactory or excellent rating, you can request a formal audit from the MTO, which is the exact same audit as the negative one, except now they come in, now you've asked for them to come in and do it. So in that case, the certification that I have is it's a pre-audit. It's an audit to make sure that you won't fail that audit. Because if you ask for an audit and fail, they dump you to conditional. So
That's harsh, which is
yes,
why most people don't ask for an audit.
correct. Yes, most people that have uh, an excellent safety rating now, actually, the MTO will tell you this too. Most people that have an excellent safety rating now only have that because they got audited because they were doing bad, not because they requested an audit. So they were
So it's
doing
corrected
bad.
behavior.
Yeah, they're doing bad. They got audited. They passed the audit. They then subsequently improved to the point where they've now achieved an excellent rating, which you can only get if you've been audited. But very few companies will actually ask the MTO to come in and audit. And if they do, they're smart and they have a certified auditor come in and do an audit in advance to make sure that they don't have any issues and that they won't fail.
So there's two certifications you have. You have CVOR administrator, which I believe was a
Yep.
2 or 3 day course. You
Yep.
took it with the ISHA.
IHSA.
IHSA. Um, and there's the CVOR auditor course, which was the next one that you went to. Now,
Yep.
does the CVOR auditor course also make you a CVOR administrator? Like, could you just do that one course?
You could, because it teaches you what to look for. But I don't recommend just taking the one because you're going to miss out on a bunch of stuff, right? So they don't. The auditor course doesn't teach you how to appeal CVR points. It doesn't teach you how to manage the day to day, like the frequencies for renewal, the requirements. It doesn't teach you all of the basic management. The auditor course only teaches you what to look for in an audit, which is probably about 75% of the knowledge you need to be an a CVOR administrator. But there's key pieces that I think that you wouldn't get out of that course.
All right. So needless to say, both courses are valuable. You're better at administering a CVOR if you're licensed to be an auditor or certified to be an auditor, because obviously you can go through the process, make sure you're in good shape. That would serve to not only benefit you in the event that you were ever audited, but in just making sure that you're doing the right things in the meantime. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right on. Anything you think we missed in our CVOR deep dive? I think we covered quite a bit of stuff.
Yeah, no, I think we covered most of it.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on the Industry Best Practices podcast. Hopefully you found the information helpful. If you did, I invite you to subscribe, ring the bell, and let us know in the comments what you'd like to see in future episodes. Thanks, and stay safe out there.